Norwegian brothers both run a record-breaking 5K in an actual race, and super fast runners you might know just got married to each other, and a 2:29 marathoner, Samantha Palmer, joins us to talk about winning races and learning hard lessons. All this and more coming right up.
Information about the world of running, inspiration to fuel passion and excellence, and ideas for making connections and finding community. You're listening to A to Z Running. Welcome back to the A to Z Running podcast. I'm Andy.
With Zach here.
And we are still running, and we hope you are too.
Still getting in the training, despite the fact that the trees are clouding the air with their pollen.
I know. It's been kind of rough for me lately. You
It
too,
has been.
Zach?
Well,
I didn't realize that.
You have like some more breathing concerns that are needing to be addressed. We're looking medically into what might help with that. And allergies may just be a significant part of it. Because it's, as you say, you can't even run down certain roads and sidewalks right now.
Yeah. So I did some troubleshooting, and I did avoid the trail that I run on, and it seemed to help somewhat. So we'll keep working on that.
Yeah, it's like those. I don't know if it's apple blossoms or cherry blossom,
They're
whatever
white.
the blossom. They're the white flowering trees.
Yes.
And you run by it, and it's like a cloud of pollen.
Yeah.
Just oppresses you from all directions.
It's rough.
It's incredible. And I don't really have issues that I know of with allergies, but I still can't handle that.
Well, that's good to know. It's good to know that it affects everyone. That's not just me.
Or maybe it's just us.
Maybe it is. Maybe we're sensitive.
Sensitive.
So sensitive.
Sensitive to your flowering trees.
Well, enough about our running and our issues with the blossoms and whatnot. Let's talk about an athlete today that we're going to be having on air. That's Samantha Palmer. We're really excited to have her on. She's a fabulous marathoner and has a lot of great insight for us.
And some extra special bonus stories after the interview as well, because we talked to her off air and got even more interesting things out of the conversation. So we'll have to share that after you hear some of her experiences. And before all of that, some world of running. So, Andy, it just so happens that there are actually some things happening in the world of running.
Yes.
And some actual events, as it were. Norway, most recently, that we're aware of, did start reintroducing road races, but it's like the format is they can only run 6 at a time in like waves of 30-second start times.
What?
So this is how they did this. Now that I've set that up for you, so imagine a race experience where you're just running against 5 other people until either someone behind you catches up to you or you catch up to the people in front of you, which is certainly very likely, except for these guys. So if you're not familiar with the Ingebrigtsen brothers, and they are absolutely famous in Europe. So if you're not familiar with them, it's probably because you're American.
And you will be probably after the Olympics. If you are not familiar with them now,
Seriously.
you probably will be.
Well, and so who knows exactly what that's going to look like. But there's 3 brothers by the name Ingebrigtsen. So it's Philip is the oldest, Henrik, and Jacob. And the 3 of them are all superstar runners. And what is crazy is they've been superstar runners at just about the same time, which is phenomenal because they're not super close in age either. Jacob's the youngest, and as you might guess, he has tended to be the most accomplished at this point. So
Chasing
he's
after those
definitely,
brothers.
yeah, he's definitely winning races, against his brothers generally means winning championship level races. So he's been doing that his whole life, right? Trying to keep up with his brothers. So here's what happened though. This was a road 5K race, and it was only Henrik and Jacob in this one, and they took down the Norwegian record for road 5K together. They both bested the previous record, but Jacob did win just by a hair. It was like 2 seconds. So 13:29 was Jacob's finishing time, now new Norwegian record, and his brother was 2 seconds behind with 13:31. Previous record was 13:37, which is solid. Now what's even more impressive is this was also a tie for what used to be the European road 5K record. So now you start to reflect on some things. Some names should stand out when we say European records, like Mo Farah and some of the greats from Europe over the years. And this guy is besting some of their work as well.
Yeah.
Now, he's not going to actually get the record because unless something happens, but a French guy, Gressier, if you can say a French name correctly on this podcast, which we can't, he bested the previous record earlier this year. And so if that gets ratified, which it most likely will, then he ran 13:18, so a little bit ahead of that. But I love talking. You can see that I've been starved talking results because there's no results to talk. But it's just one of those things that's great. It's great to see something like this in a normal time, but even better when we're all just hungry to see something happen.
Yeah.
Nice work to the Ingebrigtsen brothers.
So exciting. Well, something that's kind of like local to us, but also familiar names to you. Leah O'Connor got married this weekend. Yes,
and
to Lewis Fallon.
Someone also got married. Someone else also got married. Lewis Fallon also got married.
Who? He's a former teammate of ours from Cornerstone University.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And for a bit of time post collegiately too. He and I were running for Q and our Q Elite together.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
We've been teammates for a while.
Indeed. So exciting news. And Andy, you got to shoot a few pictures of that, didn't you?
Yes. So as part of like that small group of around, 10 people that were able to be there. So it was quite an honor, and it was a beautiful day, and you could just see their radiance. There's not much more to love than love. So I know you guys are all like, that's so sappy, Andy, but they really are a great couple, and it's exciting to see them kind of spring off into Team Fallon.
Nice. So, Lewis, please don't boycott our podcast because we just said those things. You can still appreciate us, even though we talk.
We did have Leah O'Connor on air on the AtoZrunning podcast, so we'll link to that as well. And we did have Lewis on at a different time talking about track, so we'll link those 2 podcast episodes in our show notes and as well in our blog post associated with this podcast.
Yeah. So all the best to Leah and Lewis in whatever this next element of life brings them.
We have a couple great tips for World of Running information. Cody Risch, he posted a video of Hayward Field track renovation, and it is looking good, you guys.
Crazy. So if you're not familiar with the project that they undertook here, and it was supposed to be ready for racing this summer, but racing wasn't going to happen this summer, so obviously it's not. But man, they basically just decided they were going to make the craziest track stadium ever built.
Yeah, so it's 9 lanes. Get that extra lane in there. They also have a practice track. It's inside 140 meters straight away. There's facilities galore, including hydrotherapy and some access to anti-gravity treadmills.
And if you don't know what any of that stuff is, that's okay. Nobody else does
either.
It's so
fancy, super fancy. There are 12,650 seats that are like permanent, but it's expandable to nearly 25,000.
Now, once again, if that sounds big to you, it's because you're not European. Because over there, they've got track stadiums that seat more than an NFL stadium. But they look at track in a little bit different way. And so Hayward Field, what they're doing right here is they're saying we don't want to make a stadium that's going to feel empty most of the time. Make a stadium that's the right size for the kind of audience. So that's where that expandable piece comes in.
And it was too small before. They packed out the stadium at Hayward Field.
So this is exciting.
This is very exciting.
Very cool.
And another tip, Benjamin Murray. He gives us great tips. So thank you, Benjamin. We appreciate it. He told us about the mile dribbling record that went down. We talked about some funky world records in our previous podcast. So give that a listen.
For the mile dribbling record, you have to run a mile going like this. Dribbling your lips like that.
No, that's not what it means. No, actually a basketball. And he did it seamlessly. Dylan Sorensen, he ran 4:37 in his track dribbling mile.
On his 30th birthday?
Yeah, it was on his 30th birthday.
Way to celebrate getting old.
Yeah, by doing something
dribbling a basketball
young.
and running. I don't know. That
make you feel young.
Dribbling a basketball while running is...
It's difficult work.
Does that have an age on it attached to it?
I don't know, but that would make me feel great. But the previous record, and I wanted to mention this because of how big of a difference it is. So Dylan ran 4:37. The previous record was 6 minutes 57 seconds.
Oh, come on. Dylan, you could have jogged and still got the record.
Yeah.
What's all this running hard stuff you were doing?
Well, his PR in the mile is 4:06.
So you're telling me that he was still just jogging?
Maybe.
Is that what you're trying to tell me?
I mean, he's
when did
a
he
fast
run that
dude.
mile PR, Andy? Was it 10 years ago?
It was in college, so I'm not sure. But this record went down May 24.
Wow.
So it is very recent.
Does he have it on video?
Yes.
We gotta
we'll link to the video.
Post a link to the video
Yeah.
because that's the kind of thing you just have to see. What does it look like to run a 4:37 mile while dribbling a basketball on a track, nonetheless?
Very
I
smooth,
can't
I
imagine
can tell you
dribbling a
that. I watched the
basketball
whole
on a
thing.
track is very easy.
Probably not, but he was smooth.
He's got it down. So, Globetrotters, he's in the market if you need another addition to your team because he can run fast and dribble at the same time with control.
Amazing.
Well, that about wraps up what we wanted to share at the moment, but there's more things coming because races are starting to happen, and we are so excited to see competition returning in a somewhat familiar fashion. But before we get to anything more, let's take a quick break.
We are thrilled to have Samantha Palmer, marathoner, professional runner, with us on this podcast today. She's also a coach. She does one-on-one coaching. We'll link to that in our notes. And this woman has run so freaky fast. Palmer finished 4th at the USA Marathon Championships in Sacramento, California in 2017 in 2:31. And she then very recently, this past fall, ran a personal best time of 2:29:07 at the Frankfurt Marathon.
Yikes.
She is freaky fast.
Very fast.
So we're really excited to have her on the air today. She is going to share a lot about what she struggles with as a runner and how she's overcome some difficulties within her own journey, and gives us some really great advice for forging forward.
I really like the conversation about going all in into something we're passionate about. And the possible detriments, as well as how it sometimes works out and sometimes doesn't. So pay attention to that.
Yes. So without further ado, our interview with Samantha. Hi, Samantha.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for coming on. We're so excited to talk to you today.
Yes, I'm too. Especially, there's not a ton going on right now. So this is a great way to mix up my Wednesday evening.
Oh, that's great. And I saw on your blog that you really like the aspect of running that's about community. So we're really excited to share you with our A to Z running community that listens, our audience on the podcast and the blog. So we're really glad to have you here.
Thank you. I'm very excited.
So I want to know, we're just going to kick it right off with something really
Okay.
exciting. And we want to talk about that Frankfurt Marathon because that was
Yes.
epic. You really threw it down there. And I would love to just have you walk us through that.
Oh, it was, it's probably the most fun I've had in a marathon buildup. I've run, I guess, like a little background information up until 18 months ago or so. I was living and working in Toledo, Ohio, coaching Division I and going to grad school on the side, and then also trying to be a marathoner as well. And so I really enjoyed that because I'm a person that likes to stay really busy. But after I ran just under 2:32, I think it was maybe in 2017, I don't know, it kind of started going in the back of my mind, like, I wonder like what could happen if I was able to put more emphasis on training. And so really the Frankfurt buildup was the first time that I was truly dialed in. I had run New York basically a year earlier, but my husband and I had just gotten married. We had just moved to Alabama from I'd never lived outside of the Midwest, and training for a marathon in the South during the months of July, August, September are really, really rough. And so that buildup for New York didn't go bad the previous year. It was just like a learning experience. And so I felt like going into the Frankfurt buildup, I just learned a lot more and was a lot more confident in okay, it's okay if my paces are a little slower because it might be 80 degrees and 95% humidity at 6 a.m. And so just understanding those things. And so the consistency was super, super important, I think. And then I'm a very goal-driven person. So I had no intentions of running another marathon after New York until the trials. And then once they released that the Olympic standard was 2:29:30, I don't know, like I wanted to go to the trials with the standard,
Mm-hmm.
and just something like for me personally, and I think it was more to like validate to myself that what I'm trying to do right now, because like I don't make much money doing this, but in my mind, having the Olympic standard validated that like what I was doing was worth it. And
Mm.
so Frankfurt, like I had one goal in mind, and like that's all I thought about. Like it was interesting. Like I never during the buildup questioned whether or not I could run that. And so it was kind of fun. Like, I mean, I went to Frankfurt. I'd never been to Europe. It was the first time traveling outside the country, and I went totally by myself. And so it's interesting because I threw so many curveballs at myself that one weekend. Like, it was obviously a really big race for me. And then traveling to Europe and going by myself, like, I don't know, like it was just such a fun experience. And the race itself, like, oh gosh, it was interesting because I remember like even the morning of, I didn't sleep well. I had some jet lag and I couldn't figure that out. But like the morning of, I was just so excited. Um, and I even remember like it did not go super smooth the whole time. Like I remember having a side cramp at like 3K.
Oh
And
no.
I was like, oh my gosh, I am 3K into this marathon and I already have a side cramp. What is going on? But I'm like, okay, it'll pass, it'll pass. And it totally did. It passed. And then I remember just past halfway, like I got super lightheaded all of a sudden and I got really, really nervous. But then that passed as well. And so it was one of those races where like I was just taking it mile by mile. And even when something popped up that was negative, I was able to just talk myself down from it. And I was super, super fortunate. The pace group that I decided to go with, it had the top German woman. And so like the news cameras were on her the entire time, and she had really good male pacers. And so like it was kind of a time trial marathon, and it was just awesome. I like finished and I faded pretty hard. I think the last 5K, because I was on about 228, like 227 high to 228 low pace. And so it was kind of bittersweet. Like I finished and I hit that goal. Like I wanted the Olympic standard so bad. But then to like taste sub 228, and it was like right there. And I just kind of, it fell apart right at the end. And it was such an incredible experience. I guess like we'll probably talk about this a little bit later. The only bad part is like I was able to get myself emotionally so high for that marathon. I had a really hard time coming down from it. And then in return, I had a really hard time trying to find that again for the trials. And so I think that was a pretty big mistake I had. I don't regret it by any means. But in looking back, Frankfurt was kind of my version of the Olympic trials.
Mm.
For a lot of people who like, you know, I knew in the back of my mind that like I probably wasn't going to make the team. Like I would need a miracle and other things, you know, like I needed a lot of things to go in my favor. And so everything I was trying to do at Frankfurt, I think was trying to set me up like from a long-term career. It was good and bad because like I said, it was hard to come back for the trials, to be totally honest.
Sure, sure. Well, even, and that makes sense, Samantha, even as you say, leading up to Frankfurt, you felt like it was not difficult for you to be confident in that goal and that vision. And then even during the race, kind of an unshakable optimism, which is, that's uncanny. I mean, that's not a common thing at that level when things aren't going as well as they should, and you still have that optimism. Why do you feel like that was possible during that time, both in the training and when you got to the race itself?
It was the first time since college that I had just decided to like devote these, I think it was 18 to 20 weeks where like that was my purpose. Like I was just so driven, and like I have some responsibilities with the team here at Alabama, but like fortunate, like I'm a volunteer for my husband. So like I just decide when I'm not going to go to a big workout because I have a big workout sort of thing. And so I think it was just like I just knew so badly that I wanted to validate to myself, and sadly to other people, which kind of makes me mad that I let myself do that. But like really just validate to myself that like this thing that I feel inside of me and like the potential I feel like I have, like it's not just a fluke thing that I'm making up. Like I really, really wanted to like I want to see how good I can be. And like yeah, so it's kind of just like trying to validate that dream and that drive I have inside of me. And I just wasn't gonna like give up. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. If you could for me, just react to this thought briefly.
Mhm.
Steve Magnus and Brad Stulberg recently wrote Passion Paradox. I don't know
Mhm.
if you're familiar with much of their work, but in that book, they're writing about a tendency that passionate people have that they think
Mhm.
is actually necessary to achieve like expertise or mastery in
Mhm.
a pursuit. And that tendency is toward an all-in mindset, to
Mhm.
become all consumed in the passion.
Mhm.
And in some ways, they argue that that might actually be a positive influence, at least for a period of time. That kind of
Mhm.
sounds to me like what you're articulating there. Does that sound familiar?
Yes. I as you were saying that, I was like, in my mind, I was thinking, I'm that for periods of time. And I think the hard part about it is understanding when you have to take a step back and you can't be all in all the
Mm,
time and all consumed in it. Because I think that's when burnout and those sorts of things start coming into play. But I think like yeah, like what you just described is what those 20 weeks were. And like, obviously I had like good training behind me and plenty of other training blocks and things I was like working off of. But for those 20 weeks, like my life was that. And like, heck, I don't think I went to a single Alabama football game until after the marathon because I was like, my bedtime is 9 p.m. Like, I
yeah.
cannot go to a football game. Like, it was just those decisions that I was choosing to make. And I was like, I never even questioned them.
Mm.
And luckily, I have a pretty understanding husband. Um,
Wait, so you're telling me the tide is forgiving?
I guess so. Actually, though, I think the first game I went to was LSU and we lost. So I
Ooh.
just probably shouldn't go to any. But
So you had mentioned kind of like a letdown, and I wanted to ask you about that. Like, so you're
Mhm.
done with this marathon, you hit this high point in your running career. Zach, I've noticed, feels this a lot after a marathon, but there's it's hard to go
Mhm.
from being all in, like you mentioned, to having to readjust and re-explore the next step.
Yes. So I guess I'll kind of describe after Frankfurt versus after the trials because, after Frankfurt, I was coming off this high of like, okay, now the trials are only 4 months away. I
Mm,
can't waste time. I just need to get right back at it and like go, go, go. And so I just, I'm trying to think like I got back from Germany on like Wednesday or Thursday after the race. And I think I was back training by Sunday. And so I didn't let myself come down because I had like tasted that success and I just, I was greedy. I wanted more. And I felt like I was just going to fall behind with every day I took off. And then in the back of my mind, my husband and I were going on our honeymoon the first week in December. And so I was like, well, I'll take a mental break then. Like I'll maybe run on vacation, but not worry about it. That's a lie. Like I got a week out from our honeymoon and I was like, okay, I'm going to do these workouts. How am I going to get all this in? And it was just kind of a recipe for disaster because the whole buildup, like I got the work in, but it was kind of at 80%. Like I didn't have bad workouts ever. I just was not able to mentally dial in the way I was with Frankfurt. Um, and then coming off the trials, gosh, that was interesting because it wasn't a great race. Like, I'm totally fine saying that. I was not satisfied. I was, a little upset. And so I think it's hard because I had a spring season planned. And so it was honestly sort of the same thing. Like my coach was like, do whatever makes you happy this, week after the trials. So, not smart Sam, she takes off till Thursday and starts running Thursday afternoon after the trials, which was just not smart in any way. I really just needed at that point I needed somebody to force me to take a step back. And eventually, you know, with the whole coronavirus thing, like it did hit me eventually pretty hard. And I did. Like, I think it must have been about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I mean, for the first time in years, I took a week off of running, and not just physically, but mentally away from running. And honestly, without that, like, I would probably be pretty unhappy with running right now. And that's not saying every day is, you know, sunshine and roses.
So that brings us pretty nicely to the question about, I love what you wrote in your post. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. I think that is so profound. So we talk about this win, and let's talk about now the learn. Like, what are some things that you've taken away from these 2 back-to-back blocks? Like things that you've dissected and that you're going to be looking at to learn from?
Well, I actually called my agent like 3 weeks ago, and I was like, so in 2024, like when we're a year out, if I try to convince you to let me run a marathon 4 months out from the Olympic trials, do not sign me up. Like, just do not let me. No matter how much convincing I try to do, like, don't let me. And so I think the thing I'm learning most about myself right now is some people can run back-to-back marathons, like do a fall marathon and then a spring marathon, and like they're totally fine doing it. And I struggle with it. And I think a lot of it is because I'm able to dial in and be so focused for this period of time when I know I have this big goal on the line. And then I just can't, like, I have a hard time coming down from that. And so, gosh, yeah, I'm trying to learn it because it's kind of burned me after both of my last marathons, to be honest. And so I don't know. I think so. The quote that I had in my blog, I totally took from my college coach. I remember being at the University of Arkansas after NCAA first round, right after the 10K, and she told me that, and it's just kind of stuck with me forever. And I think it's important because, like, I don't know, distance runners, we can be really critical of ourselves, and you have, you know, like what, maybe 10 at best, 5% of your races ever go perfect, right? And so, but we have this tendency of always pointing out the negatives. And so I think in every race, it's important to acknowledge like what you did wrong and how you can learn from it. But I also think that like, you're never going to make the progress you want if you're not willing to also look at the positives. Cause you do learn something, and there is a positive from that in every race, even if it did go bad.
Also, the last blog that you had, be kind to yourself. That really struck me. And you're really vulnerable in that post. And we're going to link to it. We're going to link to these posts that we're talking about of yours in our blog post that is associated with this episode. And that is...
It's episode 34. So it's at
Okay.
AtoZrunning.com/episode 34. It'll all be there.
So let's kind of dive into that. Be kind to yourself.
Ooh, yes. That was, honestly, I didn't know if I was actually going to publish it. I kind of used it as a journal entry because I was struggling pretty bad. I'm a very relationship focused person. And so when a lot of that stuff, which is interesting because I train by myself, but when COVID happened and first races are being canceled, and I train alongside of the team here at Alabama, just on different schedules, but I can overlap recovery days and that sort of thing. When all of that was just kind of all of a sudden taken away, I was in kind of a dark place. Like, I wasn't enjoying running. I was still trying to train as if I was going to be racing in a month, which made no sense. And to be honest, like, I was having panic attacks in the middle of workouts and just not finishing them. And so that's kind of when I called my coach one day and I was like, I'm going to take a break from running. I can't run right now. It's not fun. It's not enjoyable. Like, running is normally the thing that brings me joy and peace, and like I come home with a clear head. And it was doing the exact opposite. Like I was getting anxiety from the idea of having to go for a run, and I never ever ever want to feel that way. Like I'll quit running competitively if running brings those feelings on a consistent basis. So I don't know. I was just kind of writing because I needed to get my feelings out. And then afterwards, I was like, I'm not the only person feeling this way. People just don't want to talk about it. So that's when I decided to publish it, I guess.
I'm so glad you did. I'm really glad you did. And the talk of like comparison and like seeing other people's running and how well they're doing in these virtual races, they're PRing, and then looking at my own difficulty on easy days, hitting paces that like should be super easy and they're not as easy anymore.
Right.
Like, comparing myself to other people that I feel like I should be able to run with, but I can't actually run with because we're in this weird spot. But can you talk to us a little bit about being a competitive athlete, but also trying not to compare?
Yeah. So it's a really difficult thing to balance because yes, I want to get better, and yes, I want to beat my competitors, but also like having to learn and understand that everybody's in a different place in their journey. And like I said, I struggle with this a lot, and it's why I deleted Strava off my phone. Like Strava is a source of social media for me. I did like a little social media detox because I read somewhere in somebody else's blog that like as you're scrolling through social media, your brain is just making a tally of comparisons of like what you're not doing good enough. And like you're not even thinking about it, but your brain is doing that. And so for me, it was like I just needed to get rid of those things because you have to learn. And I probably struggled with the comparison thing a lot in college, honestly, because I just wasn't comfortable with who I am or who I was. And I've started, like, I don't know, you kind of like, for periods of time, you do really good at something. And then all of a sudden, if you're not really being conscious about it, like you slip back. And I think like there have been periods of time in more recent, it's been good, basically up until COVID stuff, where I feel like I was doing a really good job of like being like, you know what, like this is me and this is where I am in my journey, and it's going to be different than somebody else, and that's okay.
I'm curious, and this question might not lead you closer to the thoughts on your mind, but part of all of this is so you say like knowing where I am and being okay with that, wherever that is compared to other people. Part of that is trusting that what I'm doing right now is what I need to be doing to take me to the next step. And then sometimes when, like you mentioned, I felt like the training I was doing wasn't taking me to, it wasn't the right thing for where I needed to go. And then that cognitive dissonance and the emotional burden of that.
Yeah, like there's no race.
Yeah. Right. How much of that plays into that?
Yeah. Yes, that's a good point. And so like, I think it was hard for me to let myself take downtime because I think it's easy to feel like you're just being lazy and you're just, I felt guilty. I felt guilty for needing time away, or just not even necessarily time away, but time away from like intense training, and just going back to the basics and allowing myself to like enjoy running at its purest form, and not in a competitive way. And so it's interesting because I was talking to my coach, the question of like, would have I felt the same way if COVID didn't happen and I was still connected with, my daily routine and the relationships I have with the women on the team here and those sorts of things? Or was this going to happen no matter what? Because I totally think that like post-marathon depression is a real thing, or like big events and trying to emotionally come down from those things. And so I guess going back to the comparison, no two people are the same. And what I might need is very different than, what somebody of the same ability as me might need. And fully being okay with that. which is, it's hard to do
Yeah,
because
sure.
we always want more. Like I always say, like, I'm going to retire the day that I'm like truly content with a race performance.
So
And
never, right? Because we're never
right,
content.
right. And so, like, if I ever feel like, oh, wow, that was just wonderful and perfect, and I don't care if I
Mm.
ever run any faster, like, that's probably the day I need to, like, quit running competitively. Hopefully that's not anytime soon. But I think since we are so competitive and so driven, it's hard to just put on the blinders and trust that what your body's trying to tell you is what you really need in the moment, even if like the people around you aren't doing that. um I don't know, it's hard.
Mhm.
But the problem is like, if you are in this constant state of comparison, and I've been in those, like, I've had weeks where I've been like that, you know you just lose the joy of what you're doing. I mean, I guess comparison is a thief of joy. Like, that's 100% true.
Sure, sure.
Hmm.
You've mentioned a couple of times the role other people have played in that in different degrees, and having spoken with your coach when you kind of said, you know what, I need to take some space away from this a bit.
Mhm.
What's that kind of conversation like with your coach? How does that go?
Oh gosh, he deals with a lot. Honestly, I called him crying, and I was like, Tony, I just need a week away from running. And he's like, this is why we've worked great together. So he's coached me for 5 years. I'm a very like high energy, kind of intense personality. And he's really chill. And so we balance each other out really well. And he, like, when I call super worked up, like, he's never, actually, there's been one time in our entire time of being together where like he kind of got on my case about something, but like he's always the calm one, and I'm
Mm,
always like the super anxious, high energy one. And so he just talks me down, and like, I mean, he's like, Sam, we're not trained, like, there's nothing to train for right now, like, this is the perfect time to not be a runner. And like,
yeah.
you know, I took a week off of running, but he was like, take two, take three. Like, I don't care if you take a whole month away from running. And so, like, right now, actually, we're in a phase where he's not writing my training.
Mm,
I am just doing whatever I want to do. Basically, I have a schedule because I want to stay relatively fit. But, like, honestly, if I don't feel like doing a fartlek on Tuesday morning, like, I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to go for a run instead.
mhm.
And so I think he's just been really good about taking a step back from it all, and just giving me my space. It helps, like, he lives in Texas, so like
Mm.
we rarely see each other, and we just talk on the phone. So that kind of helps because it's allowed me to have my space during this time when I feel like I kind of need it.
Well, is there anything else that you want to share? Because you're someone who is able to articulate yourself very well. Like your blog is amazing, and I think you
Thank
do
you.
put out some like really good thoughts.
Hmm.
So is there anything else that you want to add to this podcast episode?
I don't know. I think, like, what I've really learned is like, I had a blog about this a few years ago, or maybe, I don't know, maybe it wasn't as long as I thought it was. But like, in our sport, like, we always have these, and like, I had it at Frankfurt. Like, I had this one goal in mind, and that was kind of like my mountaintop.
Mm.
And I think so often we have these time goals in our head, or these place goals in our head, and we're so fixated on them that we like lose sight of what's going on around us and what we're doing every single day. And I think that can really like steal the fun of what we're doing. And honestly, it's sometimes, like, in college I was for sure like this. It was, I just, I wasn't performing to my ability because I was so fixated on this like one thing that I had completely lost focus on like learning and the journey of trying to get there. Because once we hit that thing, I mean, like, once I hit that goal at Frankfurt, that mountaintop, like, my mind was instantly on to the next mountaintop. And so,
Mm.
like, we're constantly doing that. And so I think it's just so important. Like, I read the book Chop Wood, Carry Water. If you haven't read it, highly recommend it. When I coached at Toledo, we had a book club with our team, and I made them read that. But it's so true. Like, running is a process. It is a journey, and understanding that like not every day has to be this A+ high intense, like I just kicked total butt kind of day. Like, maybe just having C+ days is what you need during this phase of time, is super important. And I don't know, I'm trying hard to do that, and not revert back to like my initial instincts of just focusing on the mountaintop, but really trying to focus on the journey and be process oriented.
If I can extend the question in a slightly different way, keeping you on the spot here. Now thinking about the next step, wherever that actually is chronologically, but down the road, the next step. At this point, Samantha, what do you feel like is the most important lesson you still have to learn or have to get better at learning to take you to that next step?
I think what I struggle most with is sometimes I try to like, my brain is 2 steps ahead of where my body is. So like, I want something that my body's not quite ready for, which is, it's a double-edged sword. It's good and it's bad. It's good because I have goals, I have dreams, like I have ambitions, but it can also be bad because I'm so fixated on like this other goal that like I have to realize there are steps along the way and like smaller goals that I need to achieve that'll help me get to that bigger goal. And like, I don't know, I have more goals in the marathon. I want to break from the marathon right now. But I don't know, I think just learning to take it day by day and honestly like enjoy it and probably learn to have a little more fun.
Well, thank you so much, Samantha. We've loved having you on. We'll definitely be linking into ways that people can continue to follow you, your running, and the thoughts that you have on the sport. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Andy and Zach.
All right. Well, Andy, thanks for setting that one up. That was a great conversation. I really appreciated some of the insights. Certainly, as I mentioned before the interview, just reflecting on what it looks like to try to go all in on something and the consequences in life in general. And, personally, I experienced the marathon in a really tumultuous way where, the build-up, I can be really focused and just really engaged with it, and it can go well in that sense. And then afterward, I just get this like serious marathon depression, and it's, so it's very tumultuous for me. And she was kind of sharing some of those dynamics too. However, the thing I wanted to mention most right now is what we talked about after we stopped recording.
We should have kept going because it was amazing.
Right.
So Sam was generous enough to chat with us a little bit afterwards about her journey, and her first marathon was a story to tell.
Crazy story.
Yes.
So we're going to tell the Reader's Digest version here because you didn't hear it any other way. So basically, Toledo Marathon, I don't know what year it was. I'm not even sure if she mentioned, but Toledo Marathon, it was her first marathon. She was really kind of jumping into it, and it was after a long weekend of track. She was helping with a long weekend
coaching.
track meet.
Yeah.
Yep. And so if any of you are familiar with the Hillsdale Gina Relays, it was after that meet, which is, that's a brutal experience for coaches.
3 days, 2 days, something
3
like
days, yeah, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So, she spends all that time doing the coaching thing, and that can be draining. And then Sunday morning, she's going to run a marathon in Toledo, her first ever. And so that sets the stage for, like, this kind of thing rarely goes well for people. But as she gets, 20-ish miles into the race, she's realizing that things are going pretty well.
She's in the lead.
She's not feeling too bad. And she started to realize she was on pace for under the Olympic trials qualifying time in her first ever marathon until
she was shown the wrong way to go by the lead bike.
She turned wrong way. So I know how this feels because I've turned the wrong way on a lot of races. Never on the track, though, which is good.
That would be difficult to do.
She took a wrong turn, and she doesn't know exactly what happened with it, except that it just, at some point, someone chased him down in a cart, she said, and told him, hey, you're going the wrong way. She was like a half mile the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So she just had to turn around and go that extra half mile back. So a full mile extra.
And here's the clincher. She did not volunteer this information. I had to ask her.
Yep.
She still won
still
the
won the race.
marathon. And she got the course record
Course record, won the race.
and went an extra mile.
But she missed the trials qualifying time by just under 3 minutes, which if you
Yeah.
do the math, an extra mile is longer than 3 minutes.
Yep.
So, bummer.
Yeah. But it was quite incredible, her telling this story and just the grit, because there was money involved and there was 2 women who did pass her when she turned the wrong way, but she hunted them down. She wanted everything she could out of that race, and I love that. So, we talk about when things don't go your way, still making the most of things.
Hang in
she
there, right?
knows what she's doing when it comes to that, and, well, a lot of things when it comes to running.
Quite the story. And there's even more to it because she mentioned there was kind of like an anonymous gift involved, and that anonymous gift turned into an unplanned meeting years later.
Well, the woman of the generous donor, the wife of that man, called her, or the daughter, excuse me, called her and said, I just saw you on TV in the Olympic trials. And she's crying, and just because her dad believed in Samantha that she was going to do great things in the sport of running, and just saw the potentiality she had there from watching her in that Toledo race.
Really something.
And here she is today. She's one of the best marathoners our country has to offer. So
she's in the hunt for those
She
top
is.
spots, which is just really cool. So we talked a little bit briefly about 2024, and that's kind of the next thing in her horizon. The next big thing, but certainly excited for the next steps in her career.
absolutely. And like I said, we'll link to all the ways to follow Samantha's journey in our blog post.
AtoZrunning.com/episode 34. We'll see you there.